6 line, and then I'm going to take a look at some viewer games. I really wanted to take a look at a Scandinavian with knight to f6. I actually know how to play the Scandinavian a little bit. I know how to play the lines that involve queen to d6 the best. But it's an interesting opening. It's actually, I think it's maybe more common than queen takes d5 is knight f6. Actually, no, I'm wrong about that. So queen f6 is more common than queen takes d5 is more common than knight f6. But it's still going to have many kind of modern characteristics, characteristics that are similar to the main GM or main Scandinavian lines. I have a few GM games that I'd like to look at too. But first, I wanted to just go over, in the way that we normally do, these kind of the different opportunities for white. So this is Alekine's Defense Scandinavian variation, which is kind of interesting. This would be, I guess, transposed out of e4, knight to f6, knight to c3, d5, pawn takes d5 is another way to reach this situation. This knight to c3 move, bishop to b5, c4, knight to f3. And yeah, I mean, basically there's a number of alternatives for white. What I've seen the most frequently and what is the most popular is d4. With d4, knight takes d5 is the main way to play. This is the Marshall variation. Scandinavian defense, modern Marshall variation. Bishop to g4, this is the Portuguese variation. Interesting. I didn't know either of those two, to be completely honest, but yeah, after d4, bishop to g4 is the Portuguese variation, and knight takes d5 is the Marshall variation. Here on bishop to g4, the most common is knight to f3, knight takes d5, bishop to e2, e6, castles, and I guess I would say that basically white is looking fine here. This Scandinavian gives an opportunity for white to really get ahead in the opening. One of the really key parts of the Scandinavian is basically the d4 pawn gets to be played against a favorable pawn structure. So we've talked about kind of corresponding pawns here, and basically this d4 pawn faces off favorably against this e6 pawn. Basically, the concept there is that that neither the d4 pawn or the e6 pawn can move. But since the d4 pawn is on the 4th rank and the e6 pawn is on the 3rd rank, this pawn faces off favorably against that pawn. So basically, that's what's happening here. This is really interesting. e4, d takes, pawn takes d5, and then knight to f6. And basically here, there's a number of different choices. The most common is d4. I wouldn't want to spend too much time going over the other lines. I think d4, this really is kind of the main line. Knight takes d5, the Marshall variation is by far the most common response to it too. And basically, what I would say about white's position is really that white's better based off of this corresponding pawn. This d4 pawn, faces off well against the pawn on c7 and e5, and both sides have kind of good opportunities to develop, but white has the opportunities to develop his bishops first without further pawn movement. So it's interesting, an interesting opening. I wanted to move into a GM game. This is 2500 versus 2500 playing the knight to f6 Scandinavian. And I just kind of want to draw ideas off of what they're doing, think a little bit about their concepts, think a little bit about kind of what they are, what they're going for in this. And e4, d5, pawn takes, knight to f6, d4, knight takes, knight to f3. Basically what I would say here is that white's looking fine. The things that white can do to kind of advance this position, are going to be straightforward moves that would be good in almost any opening. Things like bishop to c4, things like knight to c3, castles. I mean, just very healthy development for white. Hey, welcome, Abraham. Thank you very much for joining the stream. Thanks for being here. So yeah, I guess what I would say is basically this is the knight. This lesson is on the knight to f6 Scandinavian, and yeah. Also, Abraham, if you have any interest, we have basically a simul tomorrow at 8:45 a.m. Eastern. I'll talk about it a bunch before now and then, but definitely, since you beat me in the last simul, I want a rematch. So feel free to join tomorrow if you'd like, and maybe we'll do another one on Saturday too. But definitely one at 8:45 tomorrow morning Eastern time. Anyways, this knight is facing off favorably against g6. Overall, white's just got really healthy development here. Things like c4, bishop to g5, knight to c3, bishop to d3 should be just really safe, kind of favorable play for white. But yeah, let's look at this game. So basically, this is two GMs, neither of whom I actually know, or I know of or know the names of. But two GMs, very highest level players. Knight to f3, g6. Okay, so white's up by about what, like 0.66 pawns. This looks like just pretty healthy standard situation. G6 is probably, I don't know, like knight to f3. So d4, pawn takes d5. So this is the Marshall variation. Knight to f3 is the most common. G6 is the most common response, and then c4 is one of the two most common responses out of this. So this c4 challenging the center immediately. This is called the Richter variation. Okay, curious about that. Richter variation is determined by g6. Well, no, I mean, it was a good game and a very legitimate victory. Like, don't shortchange yourself. But let's learn a few more Scandinavian lines here. Like, this is sort of what I wanted to like. My knowledge of opening line and like the names of openings is so bad. Like, it's actually really helpful for me to go through these and memorize them. But basically, the d4 knight f3 Scandinavian. If g6, it's the Richter variation. If bishop to g4, it's the Gipsless variation. Okay. If bishop to f5, that doesn't have a name. c6 doesn't have a name. e6 doesn't have a name. Knight to b6. Okay, so two, Gipsless and Richter variation. So g6 is the Richter variation. That's what's being played here. Hey, welcome. Thank you very much, Kamiki, for the follow. Thanks for being here. So this is just our big lesson on knight to f6 Scandinavian. So with this g6, it's the Richter variation. White plays c4, knight to b6, knight to c3, bishop to g7, and basically, white's going to have the opportunity to have a solid center, probably advance on the king side, h4, h5, bishop to e3, bishop to e2, but overall, white's comfortable here. This c5, which is one of the most common moves here, and what's played in this game, that seems aggressive. This c5 move, like, that feels like an overextension by white, but let's check the eval on it. c5, and yeah, so let's think about this idea. So far, I think that white's play has been really pretty straightforward, right? We've gone into this Richter variation. This Richter variation, is solid. White's, got a big center, good development. G6 allows this bishop to come to G7, and basically that's the best aspect of black's position. But there's a big idea here, right? So bishop to g7. There's a big idea here, which is basically that in a line similar to the Alekhines, white's gonna play like c5 and like start pushing this knight to different squares. Hey, welcome, Richard. Thanks very much for joining the stream. So just in case anyone didn't know, basically this e4 d5 d4 knight takes d5 knight f3 g6. This is the Richter variation. And then, c4, knight to b6, knight to c3, bishop to g7. And basically, white's going to play, c5 here. And that, to me, seems like very, that seems super aggressive, right? Like, you're basically giving up your pawn structure. It will become very easy for black to undermine the c5 pawn in this pawn structure with, like, b6. I don't know. This c5 move undermining the pawn structure it's surprising to me that that's the main line here. It just feels sort of premature. Like the other lines here, the ones that make the most sense to me are like bishop to e3. Sure, that's development. Bishop to e2, development. But c5, I'm curious to see where the knight goes after c5. It looks like there's a choice between knight d7 or knight to d5, but it's usually knight to d5. And then basically white's got this big center, which can be undermined with b6. Bishop to c4, c6, castles, and white's up by about a pawn, I'd say. So this, overall, this looks pretty comfortable. White can probably play rook to e1. White can play bishop to g5. It's an interesting situation. This pawn structure is awkward for white. First, because this pawn on c5 can be undermined with b6, and then also because this d4 pawn is backwards and will be backwards for the rest of the game. So I don't know. The c5 move, the fact that the c5 is main line there is unusual to me, but interesting. Okay, so now rook to e1, straightforward development. Knight takes c3, pawn takes c3. Let's see if we're out of the opening book here. No, there's still opening. This is a really very interesting theory. White is extending these pawns aggressively on the queen side. With white basically playing here, I don't know. I mean, I guess I wouldn't like this pawn structure, but at the same time now, with the knight having taken on c3, and let's just see how, in terms of main line, knight takes c3 is by no means a main line, but I do feel like knight takes c3 kind of validates this pawn on c5, because if the pawn plays to b6, pawn can take on b6, and then basically c3 d4. This is going to end up being fairly solid for white. Like, it's going to undouble, like, if b6 tries to undermine this pawn structure, if black tries to undermine this pawn structure, white's going to move his forward pawn away, and then get back to having an undoubled pawn structure. So that's interesting. b6, bishop to a3, bishop to f6, bishop b3. Yeah, okay. I mean, all of this I think looks pretty good for white. Yeah, I like white's position here. Knight to c4 is inaccurate. Instead, b5 doesn't lose the pawn. And yeah, I actually like that a lot better. That makes a lot more sense to me. So b5 and then knight takes c5. We'll actually have to look at this tactic, but this is actually pretty interesting play. So what did we learn about the knight to f6 Scandinavian here? Well, first we learned the two openings that come off of the knight to f6 Scandinavian, right? So we have or knight to f6 Scandinavian with d4. So d4, knight takes d5 is the Marshall variation. Bishop to g4 is the Portuguese variation, and then on knight takes d4, knight to f3, and then g6 is the Richter variation, and bishop to g4 is the Gipsless variation. Okay, so we know those. We've learned the names there, and we've gotten a more kind of complete understanding of knight to f6 Scandinavian. But I guess what else is going on in this position is sort of what I'm curious about. So things like knight to c3, bishop to f4, bishop to e2. Healthy development is going to be correct for white. I was surprised by c5. But basically this game with c5, which is a main line, becomes mostly about play on the queen side for white. I mean, white castles pretty early, black also castles, and then the focus of the game is not to undermine either player's castling positions with aggressive moves like h4 or h5. Basically, with castles here, white's going to be in a situation where things are pretty much safe on the king side, relatively inactive on the king side, and then all the play is going to be based off of this fighting on the queen side. So this is definitely a good thing to know in terms of what can potentially happen out of a knight f6 Scandinavian. Just a lot of play on the queen side. White has to maintain defense on this d4 pawn. So black's sort of facing towards d4, and then white's facing towards the queen side and trying to pass a pawn on the queen side. So that's interesting. Bishop to b3, bishop to b2, bishop to f5. But again, everything's just focused in this direction. Black with the bigger focus on d4, but all of the play, there's really no aggressive threats going on the king side here. So this is at GM level, how these players play these knight to f6 Scandinavian lines. It's interesting to me. I don't know. It's a lot of stuff to look at and think about. These guys play very accurately. Look at this. I mean, these endgames are crazy. This bishop's bouncing around between c7 and b8. And the pawns are trying to queen, but basically both sides have sort of decided they can't make progress. And then eventually black slips and white wins. But it is actually really interesting. Like, basically this queenside play in the Scandinavian is I don't know, is interesting. It's just I don't know. It's a good way to draw. Let's take a look at the next GM level Scandinavian game. But yeah, it defines the pawn structure very early. So yeah, we saw in this game that basically this c5 move, this fixes the d4 pawn, right? Basically fixes the c5 pawn and the d4 pawn, but it cements this d4 pawn as as a backward pawn on an open file. So that is kind of surprising to me that the white in the main line willingly accepts basically this open file backward pawn. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I guess it is probably somewhat committal to the play on the queen side when white plays c5, right? Like if white plays c5, then black has choices of like knight to d5, queen to b3. But this sort of defines the game on the queen side, basically. There would be no reason to play this c5 move if you didn't want aggressive play on the queen side as white. So, I guess in this line, c5 being the main line here. The other line, by the way, being h3. And h3 castles, this may be a more kingside oriented game, but in the c5 line, the play goes to the queen side in the Scandinavian, which is interesting. I mean, it shouldn't be surprising when c5 happens and the play comes onto the queen side, but yeah, it does. It defines the pawn structure, defines things very early, and fairly committal. Anyways, things to think about here. I wanted to look at some of the other lines too. Let's look at c4. C4, knight to b6 doesn't have a name. Knight to f6 doesn't have a name. Knight to knight to b4 is the only one out of the c4 tree that has a name. This is the Kiel variation. Interesting, didn't know that. I don't know. I really like the naming functionality. It's something that I've been so far behind on, like in my life, that it's just great to get to go through these and not like have an excuse to learn them. But yeah. Anyways, this knight to f6 move in this game, this Richter variation with the early c5, this leads to queenside play. That is not a surprising thing in the knight to f6 Scandinavian. And this is a good example of kind of the play that occurs. Basically the knight goes back to d5. There's also a line here where we're on c5. The knight goes to d7. Here, bishop to c4, castles, b6. The play is still on the queen side. This is a good question, Kamiki. This is a Scandinavian with knight to f6. But yeah, good question. Absolutely. How about this? If you guys are on the Discord, I don't know if you guys are on the Discord here. Let me send you the copy of the Discord. But in the upcoming schedule, and this is a good an opportunity as any, because you guys are here for the night schedule, which is like way. I mean, the night schedule is a lot quieter. So the people in the night schedule I take very seriously in terms of what they want to do. So if you guys join the Discord, or if you're already in the Discord, and then you put either openings or endgames that you'd like to look at in the game submission, or sorry, in the lesson ideas channel, Coach just put some excellent ideas in there today. I still have to confirm them, but if there's any like lessons, either openings or endgames that you'd like to see on the stream, we have open slots for those as soon as like Thursday. Yeah, as soon as Thursday, we have like full 45-minute lessons that we can do on whatever topic you guys are interested on. Like, if you guys are interested in learning a particular opening, or like interested in fixing an opening in your repertoire, just like recommend one in the lesson ideas section of the Discord, and it'll be on the stream. I wanted to leave some open slots in the upcoming schedule. But you can see Thursday through Sunday, there's just 4 open slots per day. There's 2 open slots on 4 consecutive days. So yeah, if there's particular openings like rook and pawn end games, or particular openings like Scandinavian with queen to a5, just recommend them in the lesson ideas section, and they'll be on the stream within like 4 days. So yeah, if you guys want, you can get material, live lessons on the stream pretty quickly. There's lots of stuff that I want to learn, so feel free to be creative. Coach always gives some great recommendations, so he's probably going to get a couple of those slots at least. But if you guys want to look at any particular endgames, any particular openings, like just send recommendations to them. So yeah, it's open forum for that. Anyways, we're gonna add definitely some of the ones that Coach is looking at. Yeah, perfect. That's the question, Wilro. If you want to look at if you want to have any ideas on and things in particular that you'd like to look at, it's funny. I wouldn't mind looking at a Latvian gambit, because I actually haven't seen. I'm a player who could play against the Latvian gambit. I never see it, to be honest, but I wouldn't mind learning the Latvian gambit. That's one that Coach recommended. But King's Indian Guide, yeah, sure, whatever. I'm always whatever you guys want to look at, we'll look at. So just recommend it. I'll confirm, probably tomorrow. Yeah. One other thing, we have a simul at 8:45 a.m. Eastern tomorrow, so in about 11 hours from now. We're doing a simul. It'll be game in 45 plus 45-second increments. The last Tuesday simul we had 27 people, but if you want to play game in 45 plus 45 and play it in a simul, maybe we'll have 27 again. Maybe we'll have more. But definitely feel free. I just wanted to make you guys aware that we had that we were having that event tomorrow. So yeah, thanks. And that's so that's the first GM game that we saw. We looked at this keel variation, and then we looked at all the queenside play that gets started, whether the knight plays to d5 or the knight plays to a d7. Yeah, totally. Yeah, no. So please send that, just so I have it all in the same place. Feel free to send that on the Discord, Abraham. But yeah, the ideas of the exchange French variation. Yep, we can totally do that. Knowing that line a little bit, usually bishop to d6 tends to be pretty good in it. But yeah, send it in the game submission section, or the lesson idea section. Sorry, the lesson idea section of the Discord, and we will we'll make it this week. I think. I think this is a good opportunity. We have open slots. We have 8 open slots later this week, so that's a lot more than we normally get. So, yeah, feel free. Anyways, the games are the game reviews are backed up for like 2 weeks. So if you have and C5 works too. C4 is the Monte Carlo variation of the French exchange, but C5 is interesting. Actually, I sort of want to learn the name of one more. I want to learn the names of some of these French exchange openings. So French exchange, the one that I know the best, right? The one that I can think of when I think of a named French exchange variation is the Monte Carlo variation. This is the immediate C4, but that's not even the most common. So bishop to d3 has no name, knight to f3 has no name, c4 does have a name. Let's look at knight f3, the main line here, and let's see if there's any other specifics here. So bishop to d6, knight to c6, bishop to g4, c5. I thought c5 might. Anyways, yeah, c5 is very playable if knight plays to f3. Do I recommend playing the exchange variation over the advance? Yes, between those two, the exchange variation I think is a better opening. I play the main line. I play the main line and I play the exchange. I play both of them. I play the exchange against players who I know are very comfortable with the mainline French. Players that I know, maybe players that I've played the French against before, or who I've seen play, strong variations of mainline French. The exchange tends to be a good opening for that. But yeah, I like the exchange as better than as over the advance. So yeah, you can play c5 as black. If knight plays to f3 here in the exchange French, you can play c5 and basically try to capture the center. I think the eval is going to be a little bit better. White's going to have bishop to b5 as a move. But c5, if you're challenging the center with your c pawns is usually done by white, because white has the opportunity. But it's the same basic concept as black here. It'll leave you with an isolated queen's pawn, but that's probably fine. Putting pressure on the center in the French exchange is a pretty reasonable thing to do. Anyways, that's there, yeah, I guess I would say the French exchange has a lot of interesting lines in it. So yeah, if you recommend it, we'll take a look. Yeah. So I was gonna look at that other GM knight to f6 game, or actually, sorry, it's an FM game. But yeah, let's take a look. So what we learned from that game is that play basically became directed on the king side after, or directed on the queen side after that early c5. Here, black plays the Portuguese variation. So we'll get an opportunity to see the Portuguese variation. There's 2 splits here. So here, bishop to g5 is the Portuguese variation, and knight takes d5 is the Marshall variation. So Portuguese variation. Okay, so that's less popular. That's about a third as popular as knight to f6. But bishop to g4, and then white has opportunities for knight to f3 or f3, or bishop to e2. Of these three, I'm sort of curious what the engine evals is the best. Yeah, good point, Abraham. I'm thinking like if you mostly play c6, yeah, that is a lot quieter. I don't know. C5 is a little bit aggressive for black. I like bishop to d6. But we can take let's take like a 45-minute look and really figure this out this week, Abraham. It's a good thing to take a look at. I'm curious. So yeah, here as white, options are f3, bishop to b5, but basically white needs to do something about this, about this threat on queen to d1. It's an unusual position. I mean, this is sound opening play, but it's rare that you kind of get this direct attack on the queen by a bishop in the main line. Yeah, that works. That'll work, Abraham, in that French exchange. Yep, for sure. You basically have you usually have a pretty good margin for error too in the French exchange. Like it's kind of a draw. It has a reputation as a drawish opening. You have to kind of work hard to create imbalances. So there's a good amount of things that you can do in the French exchange. That's a good line. Bishop to d6, queen to d7. Ideally, after your white squared bishop is developed. But yeah. Anyways, yeah. So bishop to g4 here is the main line, and then white has options bishop to e2, bishop to b5. But here bishop to e2 is played. Okay. So here bishop takes, knight takes, queen takes. Okay. This is interesting, and it feels pretty aggressive for black. I feel like black is playing this playing this queen to d5 is kind of accepting that the queen is about to get attacked. I think castling is the best for white here because the g2 pawn needs to get defended. But overall here, this is kind of an interesting opening. This opening involves a lot of direct attacks. First, this bishop to g4 move, and bishop to e2 being the best, and then queen takes d5 castles, and white's up by about half a pawn. Interesting. So yeah, knight to c6, c4 is probably the best. The engine's also recommending bishop to e3. I would probably play c4 and then the knight to c3. I think that's probably the safest, that's the soundest center play and development here. But yeah, I think white's good after this. And yeah. So c3, c3 is not as good. I'm actually surprised. This opening, wouldn't knight f4 then castle be better? Really good question. Yeah, thank you for asking. I think knight to f4 and then well, first let's look at the eval of castling. So the eval of castling is about 0.2, something like that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's actually a really good question. The free development of knight to f4 is pretty interesting. So the free development of knight to f4, basically with tempo. The engine doesn't like it, by the way, but let's ignore the engine for a second and really think about this. So does black actually have? Hey, welcome Vertwitch. Thank you very much for joining the stream. Black queen has ideas. So queen to d7 is one. Queen to f5 is another. Queen to a5 check is another. And queen to e4 I think is not particularly good. I think bishop to e3 just plays, basically responds with development. And white is good here. White's up by about a quarter of a pawn. Things are fine. So yeah, I guess I would say white's good. White can castle. No, thanks for being here, Vertwitch. Just since we have a few people here, I just wanted to remind everyone that we're having a simul tomorrow morning at 8:45 a.m. Eastern. Just in case anyone's interested in that, we're doing that. I don't know. Just figured it's going to be reminded multiple times on the Discord later, but I just figured in case it's helpful. Anyways, this is so basically as white here. this one is different. This one has this queen getting developed quickly to d5, white castling. I like knight to f4 actually. I mean, I don't think there's anything particularly bad about knight to f4. The only thing is that it allows basically the queen to move with tempo. Like this queen is getting can play like queen to a5 or queen to f5. But knight to d5 is not like queen on d5 is not like it's a particularly strong position for the queen. So it is playable. I don't know. I guess I would say that the queen relocating to a more permanent position, like queen to f5, the queen's gonna stay on f5 for probably the rest of the game, right? Or at least or the rest of the opening. I mean, so the queen's on f5, and basically this queen, there's no way to kind of eject it. White can castle, white can play h3, g4, but that with the queen on f5, the queen provides a persistent attacking piece. So knight to f4 encourages queen to f5. I don't know if that's better or worse, but I don't know. It's an interesting question. The other downside of playing knight to f4 is the bishop to f4 developing square is no longer available. Bishop to f4 might be a useful attack on this longer diagonal. But yeah, no, it's a really good question though, because I mean, it does feel like a free tempo basically, right? But I do think that it's not good for this bishop's development, and then this queen gets to f5, and then the knight doesn't really have a great place to relocate after f4. So overall, the engine considers castling to be better, but I'm happy that we looked that over. Hey, thanks for joining the stream, Lionstone. Good evening. Welcome to the stream. So yeah, castles. Basically, now white's comfortable and up by a bit. This is what happened in the game. Knight to c6, c3. I was thinking about c4. I thought c4 might be better here, but I guess that it isn't. c4. Oh, sorry. c4, queen takes c4. Yeah, I'm not right about that. Bishop to e3 is the right line. c3 is also playable, but defense on d4 is needed. So bishop to e3, I think. c3, castles queenside, queen to b3, queen to e5. It's about equal. White can do things to like get healthy development, like bishop to g5, knight to d2, rook to d1. But I think white's basically fine here. So pawn takes d5 and knight takes d5. Pawn takes d5. I don't know. I'm surprised that this is considered to be an error. I guess maybe the engine just wants white to develop straightforwardly here, but like, I don't know. I don't see pawn. I guess pawn takes d5 sort of brings black's pieces forward. Like after pawn takes d5, knight takes d5. That brings the knight more into the game. Probably straightforward development is what although the engine again is asking for c4, but yeah, I don't know. Bishop to e3 makes intuitive sense to me. Like, getting just like your pieces developed here seems like a good idea as white. Like your queen side's kind of underdeveloped. With the bishop on e3, your knight goes to d2, like rook goes to e1. You'll have kind of a plan to get a lot of squares in the center. In terms of coming up with a longer term strategy plan for white, it's kind of weird. Actually, I think c4 is probably the best move for getting like a long term strategy. So c4, queen to e4, like knight bc3, basically. Basically, white should be pretty comfortable here. The queen goes somewhere, but I don't know. I think white's going to actually have the ability to start advancing and attacking here. So knight to c3, queen goes to like h4 or something. And then white's position, I don't know, d5 or d takes e5. White should be okay. So anyways, this is interesting. I guess what I would say about this is, good development for white. Continuing plans are going to involve, play on the king side for black and play on the queen side for white. That's how this game is going to go. So interesting. Interesting kind of examination of the theory there. Like, I'm kind of like, both of these games, white ended up playing aggressively on the queen side. Neither of them involved much, basically involved much, trading. So basically, like, the pieces were left on the board by both sides, like, into the middle game. And yeah, we saw a game where black castled king side and a game where black castled queen side. But in both of those games, white was attacking with the queen on b3 against the queen side. So interesting. C4 and d4 structures, those were common in both games. And I guess that makes sense. I mean, d4 is, kind of played early in this opening with knight to f6. Knight to f6, d4 is the most common response. Before queen to h4, couldn't black trade the knights and then put his queen on a better square? Yeah, good question. So that's off of this line. So c4, queen to e4, knight to c3, queen to h4. Not in this line, but in this line there's the queen's trade-off, if that's what you mean. So it's the trade on the d4 square. Yeah, let's take a look. Interesting. Yeah, knight takes d, like the knight takes d4 line here. I think that just loses a piece though, because it went. I mean, good question. I mean, always feel free to ask questions. Like, I'm totally here to answer questions. So if anyone else has, always feel free to answer questions. Or ask questions is the main point. But yeah, I don't think actually white ever or black ever had the opportunity. So c4. Hey, thank you very much for following, Wally. I appreciate it. Thanks for joining the stream. But yeah, c4 and then queen to e4, and then on the next move knight b c3, and then I think still this. Okay, so here this is the move you were referring to, right? So knight to c3 and then knight takes d4 here. Yeah, that's interesting. Knight takes d4, and then knight takes d4, knight takes b3, a takes b3, knight takes e4. Yeah, interesting. Interesting idea. So yeah, the engine seems to struggle with that line. Let's look. Knight takes d4, and then best for white is knight takes d4 back, and then queen takes d4 is the engine line for what it's worth. So yeah, basically, yeah, knight takes e4, knight takes d4 does seem to be like a pretty good way for black to play, right? It does seem to give white extra tempo. So like here, knight to c3, knight takes d4, knight takes d4, queen takes d4, bishop to e3, something like this, I guess, and then white's up like 0.6 or something. But yeah, queen goes to d6 or something like that. I don't know. It's an interesting situation, I guess I would say. This is a this is a situation where white's going to have aggressive attacks on the queen side, and probably the ability to play like f rook to d1, something like that. But yeah, the queen's going to go somewhere, and then the rook's going to go somewhere, and then white's got good chances to kind of advance this. So that's interesting. Yeah, you're making a good point, Kamiki, and this is this is another very playable line for black. So here basically the situation's given is about equal, but it's about equal with knight takes d4 too. Knight takes d4, knight takes d4, queen takes d4, and yeah, it's another situation where it's about equal. This might give white a better opportunity to like to advance a plan on the queen side. But overall, great question. Thank you for asking it. And yeah, that's definitely another playable line. That that line where you trade off the knights on d4. Yeah, totally. Yeah, good point. Good point. That's another choice. And then put the queen on a better square. Yeah, potentially. H4 isn't a particularly bad square for the queen. It's an unusual square for the queen, but I don't think that the engine has too many issues with it. Like, basically here, white, the situation's given is equal. I don't know if this queen's ever going to have any real tactics. Like, it's so tempting to, like, play, like, bishop to d6 or, like, knight to g4 to try to threaten mate on h2, but I don't think there's ever going to be any legitimate tactics on the king side here. If there are, they're going to involve the pawns, and then the queen placement doesn't matter as much anyways, so, like, g5, g4 potentially. But I don't know. I think it's safe to say that this queen is not really going to be in a great position to attack. Like, I don't think there's enough other pieces, and I don't think there's enough pawn support for it. So yeah, anyways, interesting. So this is considered to be the best line. The knight takes d4 line that you're talking about, Kamiki, also a very playable line. Interesting game. So yeah, I guess I wanted to look at a few more of these Scandinavian lines. If there was anything else interesting there that we might be missing. So in this modern Marshall variation line, none of the other attacks were named, so they weren't very main. Knight to f3, bishop to g4. We could look at this one. Going on this one, so here the idea is bishop to e2, and then e6, and then basically, Black will have, an open file on this d4 pawn. The knight will probably end up on b6 in this line. And yeah, I guess c4, c5 may be an opportunity for white in this game too. So knight to c4, c6, c4, knight to b6. And c5, I think, is playable, for the same reasons as it was in the last one. It'll basically cement kind of white's attacking on the queen side here. But overall, this is another kind of, high-level book line in the Scandinavian. There's actually a lot of theory here. For an opening that people make fun of as like an amateur opening, the Scandinavian's actually pretty playable, and it's got a lot of very, older, well-established theory. So yeah, knight to c3, bishop to e7, d5. In this one, white's playing in the center. That's kind of interesting. That's the first Scandinavian that we've seen where that really happens. C takes, knight to b4. Yeah, I mean, this overall plays out well for white. Here, queen to d4 takes a lot of center control. Yeah, just another one. I wanted to look at this Gipsless variation. But yeah. So yeah, anyways, kind of what I wanted to think about here was big picture ideas with knight to f6. Knight to f6, the most common response is d4. Knight to c3 is also playable, but I think objectively worse. Let's see. So on knight to f6, d4 is 0.64. A knight to c3, the eval is 0.39. Again, like this is early opening eval, like not the most important thing in the world, but knight takes d5, and then knight to f3, knight takes c3, b takes c3. Leaves white with a solid position. And yeah, I mean, this is, this again is a relatively common Scandinavian line. They call it the Alekhines defense, basically because it can be reached through the Alekhines with 2 knight c3. But yeah, this is another way that white can play this. g6, d4, bishop g7, just really comfortable play overall by white. Bishop to g7, but yeah, I guess I would say that that basically here white's got a comfortable set of things that he can do. He can get good diagonals on c4, castle, play bishop to g5, and overall here it's an equal position with a lot of play. In this situation where these pawns are fractured, I'm kind of curious about where the rest of the game might be played. Rook to b1 looks appealing with threats on b7, but this one's kind of interesting because the king's probably going to castle king side, or the king can't castle queen side, so it's going to castle king side. And then does white launch a king side attack after this? Like, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. It's interesting to just see kind of where this one is going. I guess probably play on the queen side, like rook to b1 facing b7 is a good attacking opportunity for white. So overall, really interesting stuff, I think, and basically good pressure from white. Really interesting. Really interesting stuff. Knight to f6. That was the knight to c3 line. d4. But yeah, basically this opening offers the opportunity to really fight on the queen side. I guess you can kind of see it if you really think about it. Like d4 and then knight takes d5, right? Knight takes d5, and basically you have c4, and basically these these pawns are aggressively attacking on the queen side. Like c5 was a very early opening move in that one game, and then d5 is also playable. So it does make sense that the focus is on the queen side here, given that the pawns are there, and then the e4, and basically you have kind of, if you're going to attack on the king side, it's kind of a fractured attack with like 3 pawns in line. Also, the king can't really castle queenside in the knight to f6 Scandinavian. Like, it's really awkward for the king to do that. So that also steers the play by white towards the queen side because the king needs to castle kingside and not queenside. So interesting ideas, interesting general concepts, and yeah, with c4, this knight's going to go somewhere, and yeah, probably knight to c3, knight to f3. White should be fine. But very interesting overall play. Interesting outcomes. C4 forces the knight somewhere, and yeah, I guess I would say I like White's position out of the Scandinavian opening, but it offers White a lot of opportunities to overextend and Black to play. Hey, look, there's Jen. Jen is taking her LSAT tomorrow. You guys should all wish Jen a good luck on her LSAT. She's taking a big standardized test tonight, so I didn't want to bug her, but yeah, Jen is here and about to take her big standardized test. So I hope I'm wishing you good luck, Jen, and I hope everyone else does too. So yeah. Anyways, this is this is an interesting situation in this game. We got to learn this Scandinavian with knight to f6 a lot better. And I just wanted to look at a few more. We're on to viewer games at this point. But yeah, let's get started on that. Okay, so viewer games. This one I think is from TK. Let me just pull it up. Okay, so this is TK playing a WFM on chess.com. But yeah, good luck. Good luck. Thanks everyone for wishing Jen good luck. Jen is a great moderator, a great admin, and the owner of the Discord. She's super helpful to this stream, and I really hope that she does well on the LSAT tomorrow. Anyways, it's nice of her to stop by, even though she's so busy. Okay, so here TK is playing as White. And e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4. TK plays the Italian game. I think the Italian game is good. And then he plays the Evans Gambit. So Evans Gambit, bishop takes b4, and then White has to kind of decide what to do here. So c3 potentially for White, castles for White, but a few different opportunities for White. Basically a few different choices here. C3 the overwhelming favorite. So C3, and then there's four options. So bishop to A5 mainline, bishop to C5 McDonald defense, bishop to D6 Stoneware variation, and bishop to E7 Anderson variation. Four different variations here, depending on where the bishop goes. I actually like the bishop to D6 line, but yeah, good luck. Good luck with the studying, Jen. Always like the emotes. And in this game, the WFM plays bishop to a5, which is the main line here. In terms of popularity, I don't think bishop to a5 is the most common, but I don't think it's that much more popular by that much. So main line, d4. Okay, so this is really interesting. This involves a lot of potential pins from this bishop on a5 onto king to e1, and it has some characteristics that are sort of similar to the Danish. Where White may be able to get very quick development of his bishops and aggressive attacking strategies on f7 and g7. So here, e takes d5, castles, and then Black has a number of choices. But basically, this d4 and then castling out of the way of the pin. This is a sacrifice, pawn sacrifice. White may sacrifice up to 2 pawns here. In this case, White's going to have an aggressive attack similar to the Danish. So that's how this opening works. Knight g7, knight g5, focus on f7, d5, bishop takes, and that's an error. So this is the first error. So far, this was an Evans Gambit main line Pierce defense. It went basically correctly, but with bishop takes d5, this is a big misstep. Because now knight takes d5, pawn takes d5, and then queen takes d5. And basically, Black has this very centralized queen and an advantage. Hey, thank you very much for the follow, Unknown. Thanks very much for joining the stream. And with this queen on d5, basically there's going to be, the queen facing comfortably on g2, things like bishop to h3, things like h6, g5. But Black's going to be able to get a lot of play off here. That's the main concept in this case. So, I'm not sure castling is the best. Castling might slow down some kingside attacks. Like, I'm sort of, if I was Black, I'd be sort of tempted to play something along the lines of like bishop to f5, or maybe bishop to e6, and then castles queenside. I would want to start attacking White on the kingside here, after castling queenside. And I feel like castling kingside as Black sort of slows that down a bit. Anyways, black's up by about 3 pawns, or up by about 3 pawns. It's 1 pawn on the board, but also a much better piece placement than white. White's basically underdeveloped. Underdeveloped and down a pawn is kind of a terrible combination for white in this situation. So, anyways, with pawn takes d5, the situation's more or less equal. Maybe a little bit better for black, but within the realm of most gambits. Here, knight to e5, queen takes d4, and then basically knight 7 g6 is an idea, like knight here. But basically threat and knight takes c4 is an idea. Basically white is fine. So pawn takes d5 is the move here. So in terms of things to correct for black's game here, I think removing bishop takes d5 from your opening repertoire is the correct one. This swings the game by about 3 points. It's way too much volatility in the opening. If you're gonna play the Evans Gambit and your opponent plays mainline, then pawn takes d5 here is something that I think is very helpful to know as the correct move for white. So anyways, really interesting, I think. But let's take a look. Let's just make sure that the game kind of concludes. This threat that the bishop gets on e7 was solid for white, but yeah, ultimately black is just up by a lot of material. Okay. Did white hang a rook? I mean, white ends up hanging a rook, so the game basically ends after bishop takes d5. After a 3-point advantage, I think we can treat that game as pretty much over. Knight takes, pawn takes, queen takes, and basically black's up by a lot of material with better development. Things should be really good for black. This can be treated as an opening where white has misplayed. So yeah, let's learn a little bit more about the Evans Gambit. The Evans Gambit is interesting. There's a lot of tactically complicated theory that's involved in the main line, but actually I wanted to take a look at a different way that black can play this here. The move that I think and is actually, I guess I would say junky, but it holds up extremely well, is this bishop to d6. If you basically don't want to allow white tactics, you can play bishop to d6 here and really shut down a lot of play. It does stunt the development of your bishop on c8, but I like this line as black, to be honest. It's probably not the most aggressive line by black. I mean, if you're willing to learn the theory and play bishop to a5 main line, that's probably going to have the objective best valuation, objective best position. But bishop to d6 is actually a very effective way to play against the this is the stoneware variation, but basically it's a very effective way to play against this Evans Gambit. White has the choices between castling and d4. On d4, basically you can play queen to f6 potentially. You can also play queen to e7, and you can play knight to f6. So you basically ignore the threats that come off of it. Like you go with a straightforward developing move like knight to f6. Castles, and your development is actually fine here. Basically black is up a pawn, and white is not overpowering in the center. Like here, it's an equal position. Black has the ability to play knight takes e4. So a very complicated situation, a situation where I think black is good. If you want, I would just say kind of familiarize yourself with this position. The Evans Gambit in the Caro-Kann has the ability to cause a lot of trouble. A lot of really dangerous tactics can come out of it. So yeah, I guess what I would say here is basically that this bishop to d6 shuts down a lot of the things that the Evans Gambit is trying to do. I'm also curious about the bishop to e7 line. I don't actually know that one as well, the Anderson variation. But this bishop to d6 stoneware variation leaves black very solid in the center. It doesn't cause any problems. Like bishop to a3 is playable for white. You can even play queen to f6 and g knight e7 in some situations as black. But yeah, basically, if you want to, the thing about Evans Gambit that can be so dangerous is a very well-prepared opponent playing white in the Evans Gambit is very dangerous, because there are just these pre-made theory in Evans Gambit, like theory that goes out to move 10, that white can just basically memorize and capitalize on any misstep by black. So bishop to d6 is a very effective way to sidestep a very well prepared Evans Gambit playing opponent. This just sort of shuts down all the play. Bishop to d6, something like queen to f6, g knight e7. This shuts things down, and I think that that's basically a good, that's an effective strategy, at club level, because you may run into club level opponents that have super well memorized Evans Gambit theory. But with bishop to d6, they can memorize all they want, but they end up in a situation where you have a solid center, and you can play basically based on fundamentals from here, and end up in a good position. So that's why I like that. That's what I think is good in this, and basically, I guess what I would say is that this opening, this bishop to d6 and solid center here, this ends up in a good position for black, just solid. Not really trying to make any aggressive attack, but it shuts down white's attack pretty effectively. Anyways, it's just one of multiple variations that are playable in the Evans Gambit. Maybe not as objectively good as bishop to a5, but definitely not objectively bad, and one of the four basically named lines here. Bishop to e7 I was also kind of curious about. Bishop to e7, this is the Anderson variation. Here, white can still play d5. On d5, black plays knight to a5. And on queen to b3, you play knight to h6, I guess, as black. And then, so knight to h6, d4, knight to a5, right? Yeah, getting this double threat in before the bishop takes h6. Then queen to b5, knight takes c4, and then white chooses between bishop takes h6, in which case black plays g takes h6, and queen takes c4. But yeah, this is an interesting line, this bishop to e7 line. Double isolated rook pawns are a liability, but it does shut down most of the aggressive attacks. In this situation, black's up by a good amount, even with these double isolated rook pawns. So interesting. We got to take a look at a few lines there. We got to look at the main Stoneware and Anderson lines of the Evans Gambit. Interesting stuff. And let's move on to the next one. Thank you very much for sending the game, TK. Just as a takeaway from this game, let's go front to back on this game again. Basically, c3, bishop to a5, pawn takes, castles. This was fine until good night, good night, Alexandre. Thanks for joining the stream. d5 and then pawn takes d5 was the improvement. Evans Gambit is one of the openings that's more theory heavy and memorization sensitive. So pawn takes d5 is I feel like you should kind of know pawn takes d5 out of the main line here. This is the main line Evans Gambit. So in this case, I think it's worth memorizing pawn takes d5 and not bishop takes d5. Bishop takes d5, and there's about a 3-point disadvantage for white. So anyways, interesting game, TK. Thank you very much for sending it. Appreciate it. Cool. Let's take a look. This is from Ashton. Ashton is playing black here. And he plays the mainline Italian game. Cool. d3, and then d6 is a little bit offbeat here. So white plays d3, but the thing that's important about this situation, right, is that d3 is playable for white because the white bishop is already on c4. It's not like you're hurting your own development in any way with d3. You're sort of just shoring up the center and opening up development for your dark-scored bishop as white. So what I'm saying here is basically d3 is playable for white, but d6 is not actually playable for black. Basically black needs to play bishop to c5 here, I think. And then d6 becomes playable. But the main line here is bishop to c5, and I think that d6 stunts your bishop for no good reason, really. If you play bishop to e7, the bishop to e7 castles line, then d6 becomes a more playable move. I don't know. I mean, I guess what I would say is that so on d6, white can play knight to g5, and then you're forced to play d5, pawn takes d5, knight to a5, and this line just isn't that good for black. So the issue really is, it looks like bishop to e7, d6 is okay. So bishop to e7, castles, d6 is okay, right? D6 is fine there. It's the second most common move. But the reason why is because, the bishop is already developed. And you can play d6 after that because if knight to g5, then castles for black. But playing d6 here, and you're vulnerable to knight to g5, which gives white like a one pawn eval advantage because the f7 pawn is so vulnerable. So that's the change. So I think this change is worth making, Ashton. I think d6 just isn't playable here. If you want to play bishop to e7 and d6, that's a completely fine black structure in the Italian game, but you need to play bishop to e7 before you play d6. Otherwise, you could run into knight to g5, and then that would cause you problems as black. So d6 isn't particularly playable. Now you play bishop to e7. So that's what you were doing. But the order here is actually very important because knight to g5 means that black has to sacrifice a pawn in order to make things okay. Do I think it values to trade a bishop and rook for the king? I've been a streamer for about 2 months. I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't even consider myself a streamer. My goal is really to just make chess lessons free. Like, it would be really cool if the channel got super popular, but whatever route leads to chess lessons costing 0 and everyone who wants chess lessons having them, is really the route that I'm looking for. Just so you guys, just so we're all on the same page. Like, so I don't consider, I've been streaming for about 2 months, but I'm not a streamer. Basically, in my mind, chess lessons are kind of really unfair. I read this story. I think it was Abhimanyu Mishra, but basically, the amount that it costs to make somebody a very strong chess player is very high. I mean, it costs tens of thousands of dollars a year, and that's mainly because people aren't willing to go online and give lessons for free. I think it basically means that you really have to either make ridiculous sacrifices, or you have to be really rich if you want to improve at chess. And that to me seems very unfair. So, my goal in doing this stream, is to basically make sure that people who, don't have, access to free live chess lessons will have access to free live chess lessons. Like that's why this exists. And basically, I think it's something that's very possible. In my mind, it's kind of a ripoff that, you can basically give free chess lessons, and that there are free, masters giving free chess lessons on the internet, and yet people are still charging, money for free chess lessons that could easily be free. But like, that's my goal here, at the end of the day, is really just to provide a free option. Because the way that things are, to me, it's not okay that if you're rich, you get to be, you get an opportunity to get training resources that someone with a worse financial background wouldn't. So that's why that's why this stream exists. In terms of being a streamer, I've done this for 2 months, but anyways, I enjoy doing this. This is fun for me. Do I think it values to trade a bishop and a rook for a queen? I don't think so. Usually, there are situations in which a bishop and rook for a queen can be fine. But basically, bishop and rook for queen, usually isn't enough. There's specific situations where it's worth it, but why is it not okay? Not okay that to trade a bishop and rook for a queen, or that it's not okay that rich children have access to chess lessons that poor children don't? Because the second one should be pretty clear. I mean, I don't know. For me, in my mind, like, if you have the ability to pay for kids' chess lessons, if it's, the people have the best opportunity to improve at chess, relatively early in their lives. And the fact that only rich kids can really achieve the highest level of, I mean, I don't think anyone would dispute it. I think that, you basically, the first 10 years of your life, right, are the most important in becoming a very strong chess player. I mean, it's basically it's basically a resource that rich kids have access to that poor kids don't. So, my goal is to basically have this stream become popular, and then have streams by even stronger players than me become popular, and then basically make it so that chess lessons are completely free. That's the goal. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. In my mind, it's not okay that people have access to better training resources than others because of their financial situation. That's not good, but I don't know. I mean, there are exceptional cases for sure, but I think that in this case where we have the ability to give free chess lessons, and we definitely do, like let's be real about this. We absolutely can give completely free chess lessons. GM Nixons, who I think is great, and does a much better job than I'm capable of doing. He gave a free lesson to 300 people. Like he gave a free lesson to. He's a grandmaster, and he gave a free lesson to 300 people. Right? Let's think about that for a second. Like, it really does scale. Like, it was a completely successful lesson. 300 people all in the same, all in the same stream learned something for free. So if we're able to develop that, then I don't see any reason why there need to be paid lessons at all. If a GM can get on a stream and give a free chess lesson to thousands of people, then how is it okay that there are people still charging for that good that can basically be given for free at very little cost? Anyways, I don't know what I don't know what I deserve, but at any point, what I'm saying is that it's kind of it's gonna happen. Chess lessons are gonna become completely free for everyone, because people are going to see that this is a successful streaming concept. GM Nixons might get to this first, but he might do it successfully first. But I'm actually completely fine with that, to be honest. Like, the goal is to really create free chess lesson streams. I'm not a professional chess player. I'm a professional application developer. Like, this is not my job. I'm not a chess teacher. But the goal of giving free chess lessons to everyone and making it so that that market is completely free chess lessons to everyone, that's the goal, and that's what I've said. I have some time. I have my own business and time flexibility, so I'm just interested in creating my own, or I'm basically interested in fixing that market so that there's no, there's basically no opportunity for people to not have access to the free chess resources that they need. Anyways. Anyways, yeah, the Arena Masters, if you guys want to learn about that, since we've got some people here, feel free to take a look. These are the FIDE titles. The FIDE titles, since the stream has started, I got my FIDE title, and Felion got his FIDE title, but a lot of people don't know about this. This is actually FIDE titles. So, basically they're FIDE masters. There's the classical, Grandmaster, International Master, FIDE Master. But FIDE also gives master titles to people who play on their FIDE site. So if you'd like to become an official master as determined by FIDE, this arena titles, these titles here, this is an opportunity for you to become a master. And I got mine. I got my Arena Grandmaster title. That's the first FIDE title that I've gotten, and Aphelion got his FIDE Arena Candidate Master title. So you really can become a FIDE titled master if you'd like. And yeah, this is an opportunity that Alexandre just brought up. So yeah, hey, welcome, Lauren. Thank you very much for joining the stream. Thanks for being here. So yeah, so basically going back to the game, and just one other thing, I'm probably going to stream my first USCF rated games. There's a USCF rated tournament on chess.com that starts at 11 p.m. Eastern time. I'll stream the first few games of it just for fun, but I just wanted to warn you guys, at 11 o'clock I'm going to start doing the USCF rated tournaments. But yeah, okay, so this bishop to e7, d4, bishop to g4, d5, knight to d4. Yeah, so this line, I guess I would say, need a mod for those games, which, yeah, no, I mean, we'll take a look. But yeah, we'll be, the next simul is at 8:45. Oh, the USCF games. Yeah, the mods, I don't know about the mods for the USCF games. I've had pretty good luck with those USCF tournaments. They're pretty well run online, considering what they are. The next simul is at 8. Oh yeah, that's true. Yes, good point. And actually, that's a really good point. I've asked people about this specific topic, Lauren. I was like, aren't I interacting with people during my USCF games? But they were like, nah, just as long as you're. But anyways, yes, good idea, Lauren. Yes, definitely. Nobody share moves. Nobody say anything while I'm playing the USCF games. If I need to, I'll take the stream offline. But But yeah, I don't want any help in my USEF games. That much is true. But yeah, thanks, Lauren. Always happy to have more. But yeah, to have more support. But yeah, I think everyone will. I have a good feeling about this. I think everyone will be cool, and if anyone starts sharing moves, then I'll just take the stream off. Yeah, no, we have a good group here. I think everyone's kind of on the same page. Yeah. So next simul is at 9:40 or is it 8:45 a.m. Tomorrow. But yeah, thanks, Lauren, for sure. I'll keep you in mind. But yeah, if you I have to figure out kind of who's modding everything at this point. But yeah, that's a great idea. We'll figure it out, basically. But yeah, if you're interested in becoming a mod for these channels, Lauren, just let me. We can talk about that for sure, like off stream. But I'm sure we could work something out. So yeah, next simul is at 8:45 EST tomorrow. Yeah, 6:15. Yeah, and if anyone wants to see the simul, the next simul is at 8:45 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow. This is pretty soon. But yeah, 8:45 a.m. I'm gonna do the first 3 game reviews tomorrow morning, and then we're gonna do a simul which is gonna be like 45 minutes plus 45-second increment. Okay, cool. So d4, bishop to g4, knight to or d5. And I think, yeah, so yeah, everybody's welcome. The last one on a Tuesday had 27 players. We'll see how much the next ones have. But yeah, everyone here is invited, of course, and yeah, I'd love to have everyone join. So here, white plays d4, and d4 is not a move that's in the theory. So d4 and then e takes d4 is best. So an improvement for black here, e takes d4. D4 is basically not a great move for white. This kind of neutralizes the center. Knight takes d4, knight takes d4, and then queen takes d4, and then like either c6 or castles. I mean, this kind of, fixing the center for black is not necessarily that good. But knight to d4, knight to d2, black should be okay. So in this situation, with knight takes d2, knight takes d2 is the correct move. And I think that this, so we'll move on after this this move, but knight takes d2 is actually the tactically correct move here. Because knight takes d2, and then with pawn takes, you play bishop to h3, and white's left with doubled isolated pawns and an open kingside with a bunch of black pieces facing towards it. Queen can't take. And if knight takes, which is the most natural move here, so knight takes f3, knight takes f3, knight takes e4. So that's the improvement for Ashton in this game. That's that's basically a better play for black tactically here. But the opening also was kind of weird because d4 and then is an unusual move. Pawn takes d4 is the best. So the 2 things to take away from this game, Ashton, basically you had an opportunity to win the e4 pawn tactically, and then when d4 gets played, pawn takes d4, neutralizing the center, plays out fine for black. Here you can play like knight takes e4, and basically the e4 pawn is hanging. So e4 pawn hanging in 2 different lines of this opening. So I guess I would say with the bishop on e7, you can comfortably play knight takes e4. The second one is bishop to d6. So here basically bishop to c4, knight to f6, d3, d6. Here I guess I would say d6 runs into knight to g5. I wouldn't play this. So knight to g5 and then something like bishop. So yeah, bishop to e7 is basically forced before d6. If d6, knight to g5. So this is the first one. Bishop to e7 before d6 is the opportunity, and yeah, that's what I would say. So here, bishop to e7 before d6 is the play for black. Knight to g5, and then you can castle out of it. But with d6, you can't castle out of it, so you're forced to play like at knight to g5 and then d5. Yeah, so bishop to e7 comes before d6. That's a takeaway, and then knight takes e4 is also very important for knight takes e4 was also an improvement for black in a few different places. Anyways, I wanted to just move on to the next game. Thank you for sending the game, Ashton. Bishop to e7 before d6 in that Hungarian defense, and then also there were a few tactical opportunities to win on e4. All right, Vertwitch, here we go. Ready to go on this. Thanks for being here, and let's go. So basically, and also let me just join this. I'll just join this USCF tournament, so I won't get defaulted. Basically here, here's this, and then e4, g6, d4, knight to f6, bishop to d3. Okay, cool. Yeah, the black played for the flank, and you played for the center. Knight to e2, castles, knight to c6, c3. I like the way that white's playing this. I think that this all makes sense for white. Basically with this center, you're capitalizing on black's kind of passive play. Pretty weak D on, basically pretty weak defense of the center for black, and basically c3, d4, e4, knight to g3. So yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, good night, Alexandre. Looking forward to seeing you on the simul tomorrow if you make it. Thanks very much. So yeah, c3 and then e5 should provide good opportunities for white. d5, e5, knight to d7, and basically, yeah, white's this center is completely yeah, sure. Just send it to me. Just Kamiki. Just send it on the Discord in the lesson ideas section. We've had a few tonight. A few basically talking about coach and talking about Wilrox's ideas. But yeah, please send it on the Discord just so I have them all in one place, Kamiki. Just because I want to go over this game. So, but yeah, please send it, and then we'll get to it within the next week or so. Okay, so bishop to g7, knight e2, castles, knight to c6, c3. Basically, white's up by like a pawn, and this should be good. So d5 is the first challenge that black's made for the center, but e5, and this is a really strong yeah. Let's watch the language. Honestly, I'm kind of interested in keeping this as like family friendly as possible. Like honestly, like to me, it's one of these things where chess needs to be kind of more comfortable. Like I guess what I would say about this is like I think it's bad for chess to even have like the Bong cloud opening. Like it's instantly like family unfriendly. Like the Bong cloud opening is just like a terrible publicity thing for chess. Or in my mind. Others may disagree, but like I don't know. It just seems it just seems like a bad idea from a marketing standpoint to have the Bong cloud be like a popular opening. I mean, I guess maybe it increases like sales to teenagers, but it definitely decreases sales to like students. Anyways, I'm just honestly not even gonna worry about it tonight. But yeah, that particular issue, like the Bong cloud opening, like that just seems very unhelpful to chess. So yeah. Anyways, bishop to e3, knight to b6, queen to d2, knight to c4, bishop takes, pawn takes. Basically, white's better here. D takes c4. White has a better center, and yeah, white has a clear edge here. Pawn takes c4, bishop to h6, bishop to f5, bishop takes, king takes, f4. Yeah, white's fine. I think in this idea, I think f4 might be a little bit premature. I think instead maybe h3, g4, f4. But f4 can definitely be played and might be effective to attack the king here. But yeah, h3, g4, f4, and white's white's fine. Queen to d5, knight to g3, bishop to d3. White is fine here, I guess. Will black attack the weak dark squares? If he has the opportunity to. Right now, white's missing some pieces. Or white attack the weak dark squares? Knight to g3 facing f6 and h6. Yeah, makes sense. Bishop takes, pawn takes, bishop to h6. Yeah, white's fine. f4, queen to d5, knight to g3, and yeah, rook to e1. Okay, so white's fine. Probably way that white can move this forward. Queen to d2, knight to d2, knight to e4. White should be comfortable here. Queen to e3, knight to e7. But yeah, I think White's got a better situation. White's got a more aggressive attack. I think this center is providing a really solid, a really solid set of opportunities for White. So yeah, computers suggest weird moves sometimes. Yep, I agree. In this particular case, I like the way that White played and got this big center, e5, d4, c3, b2. This seems like a smart idea for White. Bishop to h6, bishop to f5, bishop takes. And yeah, Black King is kind of, playing aggressively here. Knight to g3 is probably the idea. Knight to g3, queen to g5, knight to h5. Yeah, probably the best way for White to go about doing this. Knight to g3, queen to g5. There should be an aggressive attack for White that's going to provide value here. Maybe h3, g4. Maybe h3, g4, queen to e3, knight to d2. But a lot of ways that White can play this. Yeah. So f4, knight to g3, bishop to d3. I think White just can comfortably play with this. Like rook to f2, f5. I would definitely play rook to f2 over rook to e1 here. The rook belongs on the e file supporting f5, not on e1. But yeah, that bishop to d3 doesn't really help very much. You're right about that. Yep, good call, Lauren. Yeah, honestly, I don't really care about that stuff. Honestly, yeah, I'm just gonna not worry about that. That was the one. Oh, sorry, that was the one yesterday, right? Or was that the one yesterday, or was that the one like a month or two ago? I don't really remember. I don't know the names. Honestly, those things are less of a. I mean, the cheaters always get caught, right? Like they always get caught. It's really easy to catch people who are playing like 99% chess consistently. So I'm just like, I don't know. I don't even worry about this stuff. Queen to g3, h5, knight to f3, bishop to g4, knight to g5, and yeah, White's comfortable here. White's up by about half a pawn. Things like h3 are probably good. Things like knight to e4 are good, but basically advancing a kingside attack here. H3, knight to f3, knight to h4. There are multiple ways that White can advance this kingside attack. I just wouldn't have been so quick to move the rook off of d3, or sorry, off of the f file when bishop plays to d3. Yeah, I think White's fine. Rook to f2, rook to f3. Those are the ways that White can move this forward. The rook on e1, whatever. I think this short changes the attack. Playing rook to e1. Rook to f2 better. So yeah, in terms of improving this game for White, just since we're a little bit time constrained here, I like the pawn structure. I thought this was a good idea. Bishop to e3. Bishop to e3. I guess I would say, I don't know, maybe f4 instead. The engine's pushing for rook to e1. How's f4 look? I like f4. F4 sort of cements the attack a little bit earlier. Bishop to e. I prefer I prefer f4 over bishop to e3. Starting the attack early. Queen to d2. Bishop takes. Pawn takes. It's about White's up by about a pawn and a half. Good stuff. Bishop takes. King to g7. f4. f4 is a little bit late here. Maybe queen to e3. I think White needs to get developed if he's going to actually make this attack. So I would say queen to e3 here. Knight to d2. f3, g4, f4, f5. That's probably the best way to do it. But f4, it doesn't really fix the developmental problems. The developmental problems are really necessary to deal with. Queen to e3, queen to e3, knight to d2, getting that queenside rook into the mix. I think that's better for White. So yeah, f4, knight to d5, knight to g3, bishop to d3. And using that hook, like Lauren is saying, that's definitely a good opportunity. Rook to f2, f5, yeah, that makes sense to me. Rook to e1, e6, queen to e3, knight to d2. It should be about equal. This was kind of underwhelming way for White to play this. So anyways, in terms of actually very concrete things to do to improve this game. I would say work harder on the queenside development. F4, queen e3, knight to d2. That's the way to get this to move forward as white. And yeah, white has a large positional advantage. And yeah, in this point, white's going to start attacking. So yeah, makes sense to me. But yeah, I would say work harder on the queenside development. Start moving. Be ready to move be ready to move h3, g4, and get the aggressive attack going. But pay attention to the queenside development. That's very important here. Queen to e3, knight to d2, g4, and yeah. Yeah, f4. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say. I mean, it depends on your meaning of full development. But queen to e3, knight to d2, f4, g4 is a good way to push forward. So yeah, I think that's what you want to do there, Vertwitch. And yeah. Anyways, thank you very much for sending the game. I'm gonna get started on my USCF game. Everybody, be cool. If you aren't cool, then I'm gonna just turn the stream off. But yeah, just so you all know. Thank you all very much for being here. Thanks very much for joining the lesson. And yeah, very good games from everybody. Thank you very much. No move suggesting. If you move suggest, I'm just going to take the stream offline, which is not a... But I think everyone's cool. Everyone will be cool, hopefully. If not, then, that's fine too. We have a course of action for that as well. So yeah, gonna start an attack here. Gonna play knight to g6, knight to f4, yeah, no, I mean, honestly, the lesson is over. I'm here to give lessons, not to play. There are other people who like to play, but I'm just here to give lessons. This I'm just doing because it's fun. H5 and then yeah, sounds good, Lauren. Appreciate it. So yeah, H5, H4 looks like a good plan. And threats on F2 probably. I don't know. Going for the quick, basically going for the quick guaco piano attacks that I like. Queen to F6 played super early, and probably not soundly. But these games are fun to play in Blitz. Knight probably goes to H2. Yeah, no, thanks, One. I appreciate it. Thanks for the shout out on that. Like honestly, the goal is just to give free chess lessons. Yeah, of course, Vertwitch, and yeah, no problem. Anytime. Please send as many games as you'd like. And I'll try to get to them as I can. But yeah, thanks everyone very much for joining and for watching the lessons. The goal is to give free lessons. Chess lessons should cost 0. Chess lessons will cost 0, and I'm happy that I get to do a project where I get to push things in that direction. It's very worth my time. It makes me feel good. So. Thank you guys for supporting the stream and for being here. I'm going to probably play like G5 and G4. I'm sure I'm worse in this game, but I feel like black has a lot of practical compensation, especially considering that it's blitz. I'm not too worried about... maybe I should be more worried about A7, but... I don't know, whatever. I'm ready to play knight b8. Yeah, thanks for sending the game, Vertwitch. Feel free to send as many more as you'd like. It's always I'm always happy to look them over. Yep. Knight to f4. Think like queen to g6. Just get the attack. There's also some ways of winning the pawn, right? Bishop takes f3, and then knight takes f3, knight takes h3, queen takes f3. Now I have to decide how to continue this thing. Like, rook to g6 looks pretty ridiculous, but might be the best. I'll just play it, whatever. Tactics on the king side. These are complicated. Maybe knight takes h3. Like, not immediately, but like as a broader thing. I should do 30-minute games and talk about do's and do nots in games. Yeah, I think that's yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. I don't know. I guess. Honestly, I have to think about sort of what to do. Like, I just don't want to do things that other people have done. Like, my goal is really just to replace the lessons model. I don't. I want to steer clear of what the other streamers are doing. To be honest, it seems like there's plenty of people. I mean, I like, you know, we can do anything a little bit, but yeah, Richard, I feel like a lot of streamers do that, you know. So it's sort of like not that useful. But I'm happy to do it a little. It's like, if other streamers are doing it, then there's not really much advantage to me doing it. You know? I mean, I don't know. I don't know, but it's an idea. Like it's an idea. I'll try anything like a little bit, but it's sort of like I see a lot of streamers doing that, so I'm like, it seems like that market's kind of saturated. All right. Well, white defended really well, but I'm still up a pawn, so. Or no, I guess I'm not up a pawn. I still feel like I have a pretty good position here, though, and a big time advantage. That's gonna matter. If the knight plays to f7, then I take the d3 pawn, so I don't think that was a particularly good trade. Yeah, he just goes back. All right. Good enough, I guess. Cool. Interesting. Interesting game. He seemed to make some tactical errors. Let's see. We can look that one over really quick. I have a feeling I was doing pretty badly, and that I had a lot of practical compensation, but was pretty much down the whole time. Yeah. Yeah, no, those long games, I mean, it's an interesting idea, Richard. I'll definitely keep that in mind, for sure. But yeah, I like the lesson. I sort of like the lesson format. All right, I'm gonna play one more. So I guess I'll play one more on the stream. But yeah, no, I'll think about it. I'll think about it, Richard. I'll think about how we can kind of make that, make that into a lesson. Analyzing my old games. Yeah, I could do that for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of old games that I want to look at. There's a lot of opening theory too that would really help. Honestly, I'm not a particularly strong opening player, so like getting to go back and learn like all these openings is actually really helpful for me. So I could probably look over some old opening, some openings that I've played. But yeah, old games that I've played too, sure. Let's look at this one. All right, this one's over. All right, this is the last one. I'm gonna play this one, and then I'm gonna wrap up the stream. But we'll play one more just for fun. Okay, JCR chess. Good luck. Do I play the Slav? Sometimes. I play the Slav and the Grunfeld. Between the Slav and the Grunfeld, I have pretty good. I'm comfortable with either. The Slav, semi-Slav, those are the openings that I kind of recommend. Like semi-Slav is just really solid. That's Yeah, I like that idea, Lauren. Yeah, definitely. I sort of wonder if I could take in games and then choose the openings based off of the games. Like it would be great if so far we haven't done this, but it would be great if I could like time the games so that we were always doing like a lesson on a particular opening, and then we had like 3 viewer games on that particular opening. Or like maybe what we should do is we should have like decide the opening day first, and then have people send in games specifically that they played from that opening. But it might be hard to coordinate exactly because people might not want to volunteer games. But anyways, yeah, that would be cool. It would be cool if we could sync the games and the games and the opening lessons better. That would be cool. Yeah, yeah, no, there's definitely some work that needs to be done there. Yeah, makes sense to me. Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, I was thinking that we could just design a web page, but honestly, the Discords worked pretty well. Like, I was thinking we could like put together like a web page, like a web form, and just have people like upload PGNs or whatever. But I guess I got lazy and never did that. So yeah, that is a good point. I would like to have that information for sure. It's always really helpful. Coach is one of the people who like does these really long write-ups on like exactly what's going on in each game that he plays, and like it's actually really helpful in terms of guiding the analysis. So yeah, there's probably I don't know. There should probably be more information taken on games that people submit. That makes sense. Yep, I like the idea. Again, I'm sure that I'm losing this game, but I really want this kingside attack to work. I want this kingside attack to work too much. I'm like way too committed to this kingside attack. I need to like not play this. Thinking like rook to g1 and then threats on g7, I guess, but I don't know. That was kind of an interesting move. I don't think that was particularly helpful though, because that bishop on h3 wasn't really doing anything. Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. I'm gonna wrap this game up. I'm just gonna finish this game and then wrap up the stream. But yeah, these are always fun. Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's talk. If you really want to become a mod, Lord, I'm sure that's fine. But yeah, we'll talk about it. Just DM me on Discord. We'll figure something out. Cool. This kingside attack is getting difficult. I want this. I mean, let's see. Am I down? How much am I down? I guess material's even. And the time advantage is important. Realistically, I probably don't even have to be, I don't really even have to do that much. I think I can just flag him, basically. I'm gonna play rook take. If he doesn't play rook take, if he doesn't play queen h1, I'm playing rook take h2, and now I think I'm won. Oh, this is so lame. I'm just gonna flag him. This is like really bad chess, but also he can be playing bishop takes c3 and take the d5 pawn. Yeah, there you go. I was wondering when he was gonna see that. He was just gonna flag. Such junk, but it's fine. Whatever. Well, this is how you flag someone. We should do a lesson on that, I guess. Anyways, that played out like a junky game, like so many of mine do. Yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap the stream. That one was not very artistic. But yeah, thanks everyone very much for being here. Thanks for joining the stream. And yeah, next stream is at 8 a.m. Eastern tomorrow, and there is a simul tomorrow morning at 8:45 a.m. Eastern. So if anyone wants to play, there's a simul tomorrow morning, 45 minutes plus 45-second increment. I'm going to announce it on the Discord, and yeah, I hope to see you guys there. Thank you all very much for joining. Thanks all for being here, and good night, everyone. Next stream in about 8.5 hours. Yeah, thanks very much, guys. Thanks for being here. Have a good night.